And at 10, hate. Now, while in a way this whole list is kind of hate, depending on how you look at it, here I'm more so talking about the hate that people get for talking about these things online. Now, I feel like I've done a good job making it known that this isn't my favorite thing to do, and therefore I've avoided a lot of things, like being called a furry and whatnot, and that's because Chica doesn't have fur, she has feathers, or just plastic. But the real thing I don't get, okay, is the hate that people get in particular for talking about theories. Like, why are you getting mad at someone for suggesting something that they think could be plausible based on conclusions they've gathered through evidence presented in the series? Like, the hate that I was getting for suggesting that Crying Child was actually a robot, but also his older brother, kind of insane. Like, I know that it wasn't likely, but still, Jesus. My DMs at the time were freaking horrifying. The hate that MatPat has been getting on Twitter recently for saying that Gregory is a robot Crying Child, absolutely insane. Because most people are saying that he can't be a robot because he's just comparing two white kids, and that the robot is too young to be Gregory, because he would have been made earlier in the timeline. Hello, he's a robot. He doesn't age. And yes, they may both just be white kids, but like, one we've only seen in 8-bit. So design choices like 2 stripes on the shirt could actually contribute, because it's the only thing we know about this kid. Plus, he's not saying that it's 100% fact. Literally, at the end of the video, he says that it's just a theory. Like, I don't get the hate that theorists get. I just don't. And at 9, rooftop ending. The rooftop ending, in my opinion, is one of the most confusing endings in the game, because simply put, it throws the most wrenches into this game. Like, Freddy is more than willing to burn down the Pizzaplex, almost seemingly enjoying it, and then another version of Vanessa is standing on the roof after we reveal that Vanny on the ground was Vanessa. Because this one thing can help us see if Vanny is really a robot or if she's just a ghost looking down on everything. And I think that the identity of one of the main antagonists is kind of important in the series. Like, are we fighting off another robot, or is it just a person somehow controlled by a computer virus? This ending is one of the most frustratingly confusing and just outright annoying parts of the game. Well, I mean, like, the post game is actually considered assault, but this rooftop ending really isn't getting the attention it deserves, because I feel like there's something more here, and I'm guessing other theorists and other people are just like, they've come to the conclusion that it's her spirit and then like moved on. But I think that Scott left us that ending for a reason. It just doesn't make sense. And at 8, Princess Quest. Princess Quest's ending does in reality make sense, and I understand why we need to play through all the Princess Quest arcade cabinets in order to save Vanny's mind, since Princess Quest was in the mobile port for FNAF VR, and at the end we unlock the same door we got sealed behind in FNAF VR. But the main issue I have with how this doesn't make sense is the fact that how is this possible? How are we able to be trapped inside a mobile game, or at least part of our mind is trapped inside a mobile game, but then can also be ported into arcade cabinets without us escaping while they're actually moving our consciousness? And why is it broken up into 3 machines? Like, are you telling me that there was no way to get a mobile game into a single arcade cabinet because it was too big? Like, if a full arcade cabinet can play Mortal Kombat, I think it can handle a mobile game, or even like just a section of a mobile game if we're being real. It could have been because they made the game bigger, or because they wanted to make it more difficult to unlock Vanny, but the easiest thing to do for that would just be to like bring the cabinet down to where Halfton is hiding and store it in there, or fill it with concrete and bury it. Considering how we are able to actually unlock our brain like we're the Sorcerer Supreme, I think I'm in the right on this one. You just gotta hide it better, dude. And at 7, time. The time scaling in this series has always been questionable. However, the real issue I have with this is just how inconsistent it is in this game. Like, I understand needing it to progress the story, and that's fine, but the entire time I've played this game, I've played 8 hours of it, and somehow it wasn't 6 a.m. yet, and it kind of annoyed me. Not because like it's not the same as the real world time, that remains true for basically any game, but when we're in like the last 10 minutes before it hits 6 a.m. in game, the home stretch before the daycare attendant gets you, and when you're able to actually escape, you have like not even 5 minutes for something that's supposed to be 10. Like, at least give me the 10 minutes so I can figure out where the hell I'm supposed to fucking go. This place is so fucking huge and confusing confusing to begin with. And now you're introducing a time limit that isn't even in line with what you're saying it's supposed to be when I've spent 8 hours in this game and it hasn't even been 6. I also wish that they had gone with my idea of having an ending where you just waited until 6. Like, I wish that was an option. Because seemingly in this game, time stops if you're not progressing the story. So if I was just chilling in a corner, hiding from the animatronics, which is, let's be honest, realistic. So honestly, I could have just been playing for 6 hours instead. I could have saved myself 2 hours of torturing myself with FNAF. And at 6, post-game. This one isn't about making sense in the real world, really. Like, if this was real life, that shouldn't work, kind of thing. But the idea that after 6 a.m., when you choose to stay in the Pizzaplex, you are no longer able to save your game doesn't make sense from either a real world or an in-game perspective. These save spots are designed to look like reservation kiosks, where you can save your spot in line for various attractions and such, which is honestly a good idea, especially with little children running around and the parents having to be like, no, we need to wait in this line, but now we don't have to, and you can run around to your heart's content. But the idea that those kiosks are running all night from 11:30 to 5:50 a.m. but turn off when the place actually opens for staff is absolutely absurd. Like, if anything, you would want these things to be on at that point. Plus, it's a horrible gameplay mechanic. Like, why are you now making it impossible for me to save my progress when I can now see all the little gifts and lore bags hidden around the map? And it's still in a Freddy who loses power really quick. And that is a mechanic that I really hope they fix in an update, because it's kind of absolutely absurd and should be classified as actual assault. Well, I mean, technically you can save your game one more time if you go down the elevator for the final boss fight, but then at that point you really can't collect everything if you haven't done it yet. You'll have to restart the entire game to do so. Halfway through into number 5, Fanny. Viruses that are supposed to be sentient code. I can get with that concept because in the FNAF verse, that's logical. Whatever. What I cannot get behind, however, is how a computer virus could end up taking control over an organic being, and more importantly, a human. Like, yeah, we need electricity for our brains and body to function, but that doesn't mean in the morning when I'm waking up, I have my morning coffee and it boots up the JavaScript in my head. No, that's not how we function as humans. Also, get it? JavaScript? Coffee? I mean, that's like the logo of the... Okay. There should be no way for a computer virus, sentient or not, to be able to invade my brain, take control over me, and even temporarily, and cause me to kill. That's absolutely impossible, even for FNAF. It's actually ridiculous. Vanny should be an impossible villain as she's being presented. Does this mean that it's entirely impossible? No, she could very well just be a robot, just a very realistic one, or she could not be being controlled by William. However, the Princess Quest endings seem to heavily imply that she is being controlled by William. So, if she really is a human Vanessa, she's impossible. Unless she's meant to be a rebuilt Elizabeth robot like Charlie from the FNAF novel trilogy, or seemingly Crying Child and Gregory in this game as well. Who knows? I doubt even Scott knows at this point. And at 4, FNAF AR. Okay, while the concept of FNAF AR is already insane, it only gets worse the more you look at things from an outsider's perspective, like even in this game, okay? Like, if you are a character in this game, in this world, instead of someone trying to solve it in our world. Since for someone inside the Fazbear universe, these dudes are absolutely psychotic, and it works out for them. Shipping out animatronics that they know are dangerous only for them to get rewarded with literally us paying for them to be shipped to us. And then we have to fend for ourselves as we try and, you know, not die. They're even shipping out multiple different versions of the serial killer that ruined their reputation in the first place, caused multiple establishments to be burnt down but just by being there, and caused the company to have to close multiple restaurants. And he's still there. He's still kicking in security breach, but you're still shipping him out at the same time that this game is taking place. Getting close to the end in number 3, not bankrupt. How is Fazbear Entertainment not bankrupt at this point? Like, to me, this is probably the most unbelievable thing in this entire series. But that's not really what this list is about. With literally everything that has been going on with these restaurants for like 40 years, why haven't they caught on and know that these restaurants aren't safe? And by they and them, I mean like the general public. Like, especially when kids go missing from the Pizzaplex. We have at least 9 kids in the Worst Endings final newspaper. That alone should be enough to deter people from going in. But as we see in the starting concert to the game where Freddy glitches out, we know that it was absolutely packed with people. And clearly, that doesn't help the kids since they're still being taken by Vanny. So what the hell are you thinking? Not only have they not gone bankrupt, but they've also been able to expand into a giant mall-sized complex, for crying out loud. How could they do that when basically everyone knows what William did at this point? Penultimately, in number 2, Glitch Trap. I've mentioned this in 2 recent videos, however I wanted to again go over how Glitch Trap at this point should certainly be impossible. With everything we've seen in these games, possession and anything having to do with such mostly comes from a dead person or someone who dies after pouring their agony into something. So how could Glitch Trap be a thing if William still has his body inside the Springtrap suit? Unless Help Wanted takes place after Security Breach, which is also impossible because the ending of Help Wanted is what causes us to be able to free Vanny in the good and the best endings. Because, you know, Princess Quest was ported into from mobile. Okay, look, you know what? After Security Breach, Glitch Trap, impossible, okay? It can't be a thing. It shouldn't be a thing. It doesn't make sense. Finally, in at number 1, doors. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. The FNAF doors make absolutely no sense whatsoever, okay? Just based on gravity alone, they should actually require power to stay open. I don't know what kind of backwards ass world this is for this to make sense, and this mechanic comes back in Security Breach on multiple occasions, so you know what, I'm allowed to include it on this list, okay? Including the final fight against Daft, and door power has a meaning. So, I don't know, okay? Doors don't make sense. This is stupid. I'm done. And at 10, how did William come back? Now, don't get me wrong, I know this man always comes back, but I thought that this time it was really over. But somehow, without any ritual or any kind of warning, William is sitting in his own freaking recharge station. That makes me sick to my stomach. The thing is, how is this a thing? How could this even be possible since it looks like his body is still a part of the suit? You can see like his human jaw, like a set of code getting put into a robot made up of other animatronics. Okay, that's fine with me. That kind of makes sense. It makes sense in the FNAF sense. However, this seems to actually just be the Springtrap suit just even more destroyed. How? I mean, we saw with the end of Fazbear Frights' The Man in Room 1280 story that William ends up exploding into like a giant pile of human goo, which presumably happens after the FNAF 6 fire. So how could he come back? Well, my best guess is that this is again an issue of release dates. The game originally was meant to come out in 2020, but due to COVID, the game was delayed until early 2021, and then, you know, it released late 2021. And since Bunny Call, the book where The Man in Room 1280 was released, came out in September of 2020, it's safe to say that perhaps the game was supposed to release closer to this date, and it could be explaining what happened to William after Security Breach rather than after FNAF 6, since again, he burns in the Security Breach. In at 9, relationship. Gregory, our player character in the game, is certainly a mysterious kid, and Vanessa, the night security guard who's also Vanny, is just as confusing. But at least we know more about her story, being our player from FNAF VR. But what the most mysterious thing about this game is the relationship between Gregory and Vanessa. Like, what the heck is up with these two? Vanessa spends the whole game trying to lock Gregory in the security room, and then Vanny comes at us to kill us, and as she actually does do in the worst ending. But then, after curing her, we don't even ask questions. We just go eat ice cream on a hill with her and the Glamrock Freddy head. So if we're so quick to do that, there's no way she's a stranger, right? It genuinely seems like they're family, which would explain why he knew something was off with her, but she can't be his mother or sibling because when she locks us in the security office, she tells us, quote, "We'll wait until your parents or the police arrive." If it was a sibling, they would have said our parents, or even mom and dad. But with her saying your parents, that means that they aren't hers, making our options limited. And she's definitely not our mom, since she would have said your father if she was, but she isn't. So we don't really know, because she also seemingly doesn't know Gregory's name until it starts coming out of his Faz watch. Or at least that's how she describes knowing this kid to Freddy in Parts and Service. So, in at 8, multiverse? The FNAF multiverse is a thing. And honestly, even without the fanverse, it's canon that there is a FNAF multiverse just due to the multiple endings of the games. So ever since FNAF 3, there has been multiple Earths in the FNAF canon. One where the bad ending is canon, one where the good ending is canon. And Scott just chooses which one we play through. This time around, he chose that the canon universe would be when we fight with Burn Trap. However, that keeps 5 more endings with their own canon universe. Unfortunately, the Princess Quest ending is not the canon ending this time around, but I mean, like, I can see why, since it would really leave no antagonist for us to face in the next game, since we wouldn't know about Burn Trap hidden in the basement. But even still, I wonder if this section of the story would be canon in the fanverse, since they have their own version of the first game, FNAF Plus. So if they have, in the story at least, a Security Breach Plus, which one of the Security Breach endings do you think would be canon? Be sure you let me know down below. And at 7, in-universe games. Something we've been wondering since the release of Help Wanted was which games are the in-universe games that Scott's stand-in made in-universe. Well, I think Security Breach may have given us an answer, albeit not definitive. While exploring the Pizzaplex, you can find a load of arcade areas and arcade machines featuring various animatronics. However, at least one of them in particular caught my eye, Mangle's Quest. And if that doesn't sound familiar, lucky you. I'll remind you that it was one of the mini-games present in FNAF 3 that you had to beat and glitch out in order to get the good ending of FNAF 3. So basically, this game kind of confirms the theory some had about the 8-bit minigames, or at least some of them being the games that Scott's in-universe counterpart made. This Mangle's Quest being turned into an arcade cabinet actually confirms that, like, kind of though, like not completely, but partially at least. Unless the point of this cabinet was to reference the minigame and has no lore implications, but there should be lore implications because it's a detail in the FNAF game, which would then, I guess, make it canon. God, I hate this series, but I love this series. And at 6, Vanny's ending? And the canon ending to the game, the one where we fight against William Afton in the form of Burn Trap, we don't see what happens to Vanny. While yes, Burn Trap might have been dealt with, we don't know if that releases Vanny or if she's still under his control. Plus, we don't know just what she was doing while all of this was going down. Was she just chilling upstairs on her phone? Like, when there's a canon ending, you expect the main antagonist of the game to be there, right? So when Freddy and Gregory are sitting on that hill chilling, what comes next for the series? This is a question I genuinely don't have an answer to, and I don't think that I could have one. There are so many possibilities now that I think it's practically impossible for me to guess, and I think that's the point though, since there is someone taking over from Scott for the next game. I'm sure that Scott wanted to leave them the ability to go wherever they wanted next, whether that be with William as the main villain, hence his physical form, Vanny being the villain, hence her not being there at the end and not dying, or the Blob, since, you know, it was introduced and then intended to be revealed in the next Fazbear Frights, but delays made that just ruined. Yeah, but that's my guess as to why the ending is so obscure. Halfway through in at number 5, Glitch Trap. One huge question about this series that I have now that Security Breach is over is what the hell was the point of the story of Glitch Trap? If William had a physical form in Burn Trap, like a form that legit contained his actual body with his human jaw being visible, why was he sentient code? Or was that even him? Like, I get that his inclusion was to add a story to the VR game, but how was this possible if Afton still had a physical form? That seems practically impossible since, to be fair, the rules of possession in the FNAF universe are pretty well established. You gotta die. So what's the deal here? It's so confusing and concerning that we know that this game takes place after Help Wanted 2, thanks to the Princess Quest arcade machines, which, thanks to one of the lore duffel bags, is described as being ported from a mobile game. And Princess Quest made its first appearance in Help Wanted's mobile version as a way to include the Glitch Trap and the 16 tapes thing, since they couldn't really include the full normal game, because, you know, an iPhone isn't as powerful as a computer or a console, no matter how much Apple claims that it is. So what's the point of Glitch Trap if Afton had a physical form? How is it possible? And at 4, the Blob. Now, this blob of black goo seemingly has no introduction in this game. It just kind of appears alongside Burn Trap in the ruined area under the Pizzaplex. There used to be a pizza place there until they built over it, but that doesn't explain a giant goo tentacle monster, right? Like, I thought this was a normal game, not something based on a raunchy anime. Well, the thing is, this monster has been explained, although this wasn't the original intention. The original intention of this game was so that we'd be confused about what this black blob was until the release of the final Fazbear Frights book. Since I've said it so many times, even I'm starting to get sick of it, the game was supposed to come out shortly after the release of Fazbear Frights number 5 back in 2020, but due to delays, it couldn't come out until after number 11, which is where the epilogue that revealed that the black tentacle blob is in fact Circus Baby, or I guess technically Elizabeth Afton. William's daughter, who also betrays or abandons her father in the books so that she can live another day, but was ultimately the one controlling everything. So yeah, this blob is almost certainly Elizabeth, which kind of cheapens this ending because I can see all of the blob explained videos that we would have had if we didn't already know. But I will admit, Amanda did predict that Elizabeth would be coming back in this game, so good on her. You should subscribe to that. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, who is Gregory? While we know that Gregory's name is Gregory, that's basically all we know about him. We don't know why he's at the Pizzaplex, we don't know why he knew Vanessa was evil, we don't know why he doesn't go home when you leave alone in the worst ending to the game. He sleeps in a cardboard f***ing box using newspapers as a blanket. But he's also wearing Fazbear clothing, which means that he can't really be homeless, right? I mean, like, gift shop stuff is expensive, especially for a company like Fazbear Entertainment, which I'm sure only cares about money because this is like the 14th time they've reopened and kids are still getting killed. So why is he able to afford Fazbear shoes and a Fazbear shirt when, if he was homeless, getting that stuff at a thrift store, even from Target, would be cheaper? I feel like any kid would know that. He could also be an orphan, but wouldn't he have run back to an orphanage if he, like, when he escaped? Even if he left the orphanage on his own and ran away, he wouldn't know, like, wouldn't he know that it was safer to go back there instead of hiding in a cardboard box? Plus, this dude is capable of ordering robots to kill Vanny. So, like, straight up, this kid killed this woman by ordering the bots to disassemble her. And while he didn't, like, stab her or, like, do anything, he was still actively willing to kill her. So, who the hell is this messed up kid who can fit in a stroller, form full sentences, drive a van, and use jumper cables on a car battery properly to reboot Freddy? I swear, this is like a 6-year-old kid with, like, 40 years of life experience. How could that happen? I wonder. And ultimately, in at number 2, two Vannies, the rooftop ending is unlocked by exiting the Pizzaplex through the prize counter and then clicking leave. This will prompt Freddy to burn the place to the ground and for the two of you to escape onto the roof. I'm guessing Freddy's original plan was going down the fire escape, but when Gregory gets to the roof, Vanny is somehow there waiting for us. She grabs us, but Freddy, with his new eyes, is able to see her and then runs at her, grabs her, and jumps off the roof, causing them both to fall. They both seemingly die, and we take off Vanny's mask, revealing Vanessa behind it, as we all figured. We look confused, and the comic ends, but, haha, before actually ending, another couple panels are shown, with Vanessa standing on the rooftop, looking down at what just happened. Yeah, this is probably one of the most confusing endings, since it shows us that there are apparently two Vanessas. And while we seemingly knew about the whole double life thing, like, we hadn't exactly seen the two characters in the same room, okay? So we thought that there was only one. And in the Princess Quest ending, we seemingly save Vanny, and then the Vanny mask is gone. So how the f***? The simple answer is that this may not just be two Vanessas, but it could simply be Vanessa's soul looking down at her body. We know that souls are actually a thing in this universe thanks to FNAF 3's cutscenes where Purple Guy gets springtrapped. I mean, like, those souls had to have physical forms that caused him to freak out. It's not like he felt cold and was like, oh shit, I gotta get into my murder suit. This is probably just Vanessa regretting all the things she did as Vanny, even though she didn't want to. Hence the fire behind her, because Remnant needs to be burned in order to just actually be gone. And finally, in at number 1, is Afton dead? For f***'s sakes, I never thought that this was a question I would have to ask again, but lo and behold, the stupid furry somehow made his way back with a physical form, even though his body was supposed to have exploded and he was supposed to be dead, hence the whole ghost spirit sentient code crap from the last game. Now clearly, I'm very upset about this, because I've made it a point to clearly describe how Afton needs to die and stay dead at this point. Okay? The whole he always comes back trope is becoming way too overused. Like, at this point, it is the power of love thing from The Flash. Like how they defeat every villain with the power of love. Yeah, that is what this whole I always come back thing is at. I hope they cast Sean Bean as Afton in the movie so that they can kill him off permanently. Cause that's what happens every time Sean Bean's on screen. But after the canon ending, the blob ends up grabbing him and then we don't know. There's unused death animations for Afton in the game files, but they're unused, so we can't really take them as canon yet. But in the books, Elizabeth does leave Afton for dead, so maybe there is still some hope here, and the blob stops him from leaving and, like, maybe assures his death this time because she kind of grabbed him by the neck, so, like, maybe she, like, hung him for good measure. God, I hope so. Please laugh and finally be dead permanently. And at 10, Freddy. The relationship with Freddy here is a very interesting but weird one, I'm going to have to admit. It's like the two characters, Gregory and Freddy, are brothers, but my concern is why Gregory is so confident that he wouldn't get caught that he would crawl inside of Freddy. Like all the other animatronics have been programmed to track you down, so why would he think that Freddy was any different, especially after parts in service when Freddy could have easily been restored to factory settings or something like that. His trust in Freddy was so odd that I was certain we'd get betrayed by him at the end of the game, or in one of the endings, but no. Every ending ends with Freddy staying by our side, even if it destroys him in the process. Gregory's trust and relationship with Glamrock Freddy is certainly a weird thing. And at 9, homeless. The fact that Gregory also appears to be homeless is an entirely other thing. Like normally, if a child is homeless or an orphan, he'd be taken to an orphanage or to family to stay with. Yet somehow, this child has been able to avoid every form of law enforcement that's noticed him, or just avoided detection altogether, and that seems fairly insane to me. However, these are also the police that couldn't find the original 5 missing children's bodies after the animatronics were literally leaking blood, but that's aside the point. You'd think that this kid, after being locked in a pizzaplex overnight, would be willing to go to an orphanage to make sure that he was safe, because, you know, a psychopathic killer bunny was after you for 6 hours. But no. My question is, why did Gregory just go and why did he hide in the pizzaplex if he was really homeless? I'm sure that Freddy could have kept him in his green room and just let him sleep. Or hell, let Gregory sleep in his stomach while Freddy made sure that he was getting to the recharge stations every hour like he needed to normally. It just seems like it could have been avoided. And it should have been avoided. And at 8, height. Now, Gregory's height compared to his age has always been something that's bothered me. So, to really calculate how tall Gregory is, I did a good old pixel measurement off the Funko statue of Gregory and Freddy. Now, assuming that Glamrock Freddy's height is the same as Rockstar Freddy, which ends up being around 6.1 feet, which is, let's be honest, going to give Gregory the best chance here. That means that Freddy's 570 pixels in this instance, for how I was doing it, ends up being 6.1 feet. The opening that Gregory hides in, when being generous with my counting, was 118 pixels tall, averaging out to around 8.3 pixels per inch. 118 pixels, which keep in mind was generous, ends up equaling to about 14.21 inches or 1.18 feet. Going on various forums about children's car seats, I learned that the torso length of kids, while greatly varying, does end up being larger than 14.21 inches on average. Even a 4-year-old ended up having a torso of 15 inches. So Gregory ends up fitting his entire torso into the cavity with room to spare. I double checked the measurements because that just seemed off to me, and it still worked out properly. So Gregory's torso is smaller than that of a 4-year-old. So what the is going on here? And at 7, memory loss? For a kid who was more than willing to climb inside Freddy and also get decked out in Fazbear Entertainment merch, he sure seems to forget quite a bit about these animatronics. Gregory, while stumbling on his own name, may not show obvious signs of memory loss. When he gets trapped in a security office when Chica's outside the door, his only way out is to make a pizza using a robot. Now he asks Freddy why he needs to or even should do this, and Freddy's response is because Chica loves pizza. Of course Chica loves pizza! That's been her brand since the start, for 40 years in this series. There have been memes about how much Chica loves pizza. They made a whole Mazer-size center because Chica loved pizza so much and they wanted to explain how she lost her weight. Gregory even catches her eating garbage and pizza, for God's sake. And he doesn't know that she loves pizza? How? How does he not know that when wearing both a Fazbear Entertainment shirt and shoes? Yeah, seems a little sus if you ask me. Gregory definitely should be venting. And at 6, therapy. Gregory might have actually been going to therapy, but we're not certain if this was actually the case. This is possible though thanks to the 16 retro CDs that can be found towards the end of the game. That can be played with a CD player in the hidden sister location room. The retro CDs require Roxanne's eye upgrade on Glamrock Freddy. Out of all 16 tapes though, half of them are for a patient labeled with the numbers 4-6. The other 8 are for Vanessa, however these are marked with the number 7-1. Patient 46 is very odd. never responding with words and never even being named. Some assume that this could be Vanny, however if that were the case, they wouldn't have another designation for her since they just think it's Vanessa. The issue also arises that they're being talked to as if they were a child, which would indicate Gregory, but only people associated with the company end up being evaluated by the shrink. So how could Gregory be associated with this company but not have a guest profile and be wiped from the hard drive? Client 46 also had their last 3 therapists disappear, with one of them turning up dead, and they don't really seem to mind, which lines up with Gregory being willing to kill Vanny in the phaser blast ending. So, maybe it is him. Halfway through into number 5, extreme measures. Speaking of which, Gregory being willing to kill Vanny at the end of the phaser blast room is pretty messed up, especially if this kid is meant to be like 10 or 11, which is what everyone seems to believe. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her, like we see in the best ending, and he burns Burn Trap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy. So, what the absolute living hell is this kid doing, and how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? This guy kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go and talk to a destroyed Freddy. Like, dude, Vanny is literally bleeding out mere feet from you. Couldn't you have just said, like, stop Vanny or restrain Vanny, not freaking disassemble Vanny? I get that she said that about Freddy and it's fresh on your mind, but dude, you're not panicking about literally anything else. So just say something that doesn't involve a human dying, for God's sakes, especially if you know her. In at 4, Vanessa. Like I just mentioned, his relationship with Vanessa also seemingly makes no sense. We're willing to kill her in one ending, she kills us in another, but if we free her from William's control, she ends up taking us out for ice cream, and we sit on a hill with Glamrock Freddy's head, no big deal. Like, this lady just spent 6 hours trying to kill you, bro. You think that it would be a little more difficult to just go out and chill with her, even if she did offer you ice cream? Like, would you get into her unmarked van if she offered you ice cream? I doubt it. So like, why do you think this is a good idea? It seems like they're related, or at least know each other somehow, but no connection prior to this has ever been established. So like, what the absolute living hell? And Gregory isn't mentioned in Vanessa's therapy sessions and vice versa. Vanessa isn't mentioned to Gregory in those sessions, if those sessions are for Gregory at least. But even if they are Gregory's, who made him associated with the company? It could have been Vanessa, but wouldn't they have ended up mentioning her odd behavior or asked Vanessa about her younger brother or foster brother or whatever the hell he is? Exactly. This is King 100% certified weird. Getting close to the end into number 3, potential robot. The possibility that Gregory is a robot is still a thing at the time of recording. So let's talk about the random bits that make Gregory seem more like an animatronic than a human. There's the fact that he's literally smaller than a 4-year-old, however is able to speak full sentences and do literally everything else he does in this game, which seems like he's a rogue robot that's been active for a long time. He can also get all CRT, glitchy-eyed whenever Vanny's around, similar to an effect where you'd hold up a magnet to like one of those old TVs. It's kind of like that. There's Freddy's shock as to how he sees Gregory after getting Roxy's eyes, and there's also the fact that literally nothing else makes sense about him unless he is a robot. It explains why he's homeless, it explains why he's willing to kill, because you know, no moral code, why Vanny would be willing to bring him to William if he's supposed to be Crying Child but as a robot. It explains why Afton takes over Freddy and not Gregory if he's still meant to be Crying Child, and basically makes this whole game make a lot more sense. So, is he a robot? Currently unknown, but it is certainly a possibility. Penultimately, in at number 2, can drive. Gregory being able to drive the Fazbear van in the van ending is probably one of the biggest WTF moments in this entire game for me. Like, this kid is able to hide in baby strollers and can fit his torso into a 14-inch hole, but is also able to press the pedals on a van, not even a car, but like an actual van. How the living hell is that possible? I guess maybe perhaps he put like a brick on the gas pedal, but that seems like it would be an even worse idea and not very effective, depending on the brick. Like, how the living hell was Gregory able to drive that truck, or even know how to drive it? And how did Freddy allow that? Or like all his safety protocols off or something? Like, what the absolute living hell do we think is going on here? Because I have no clue. Gregory driving a car is 9 out of 10 on the weird scale, and honestly, in my opinion, King 100% certified weird. Like, who the thought that this made sense, and then didn't explain to us how he's driving the van. God damn it. And finally, in at number 1, knowledge. You know what I value more than the cars in my garage? Knowledge. Finally, the knowledge that this kid has exceeds even some of my own. This kid is the size of a 4-year-old, can fit inside Freddy, baby strollers, and various other small areas around the Pizzaplex. He's too small to go driving in one of the go-karts alone, but he knows how to restart generators, operate a trash compactor, start and drive a car, as well as identify a car battery, connect the jumper cables on a car battery properly, and then use those to fix Freddy's whole recharge every hour issue. How the living hell does that make any sense? And how do they solve that issue in the true ending? Because Freddy is still going to need to recharge every hour, and they don't have a van this time around. So how do Freddy and Gregory make it to the hill without Freddy needing to recharge? Or how do they solve that issue? This kid knows more words than I do, but somehow is still the size of a 4-year-old. Maybe even smaller. No, it makes absolutely no sense. And this kid's weird superpower is what makes this game so confusing. It really only makes sense if he's a robot that was supposed to mimic a toddler who's been operational for decades and has been learning this whole time. That's the only way that this makes any sense to me.